Hello, and welcome to the Labyrinth of Limitations, episode 8. This one's going to be on the dominant 7th flat 5 diminished scale, which is a lot to say, and there's a lot to say about it. It's beautiful sound. Let's see. It's the heart of the matter is this chord, which is a dominant 7th with a flat 5. So you can take any inversion of a dominant 7th. These are D7s. I'm going to get this shape, okay? And it's a symmetrical structure, you can see, made up of a major third, major second, major third, and a major second in series, okay? So it's a second order symmetry. And so the way this works is it's going to sound like this in the scale. Okay, and that is something I've used in episode 0 when talking about the Tristan chord. The what is it? So ways of improvising on that would be, but I could stay on this sound. Just stay on that. This is a dominant 7th with a flat 5, and then Wagner resolves it. But then I talked about in the next episode of episode 0 on Messiaen. The Messiaen just hangs out on the sound, and more on Messiaen in a second here. But so the scale then, the chord, if I take a dominant 7 flat 5 and I move it up the neck, I will see that there's some redundancies because it's symmetrical. So D is the root of this chord, and I go up to first inversion, but then I go up to second inversion, and it's the exact same shape as the root position. And then the first inversion is the same as the third inversion as far as the shape goes. And if you look at the symmetry of that in the circle, in the diagram, you can see that, it makes sense that it would work that way. So then, if I interlace these 4 notes of this chord with the 4 notes of a diminished triad, then I get the chord, the diminished, first inversion, diminished, second inversion, I'll go down here, and then to stay on the same strings, and that is diminished, and then the third inversion, and then diminished, and back to the root position, okay? So the way that sounds when played linearly, if I just play the chords, this is D dominant 7 flat 5. That's the first, that's the odd numbered notes of the scale. And then I got, right? That's just going back and forth between D dominant 7 flat 5 and the diminished. And so then now if we look at when we put those things together, the shape that occurs in the circle has a symmetry to it. It's a whole step, half step, and so it's a whole step and then 2 half steps. It's basically made of 2 whole steps in a row, 2 half steps in a row, depending on where you start. So whole step, half step, half step, whole step, half step, half step. But and that's Messiaen catalogs this in his Techniques of My Musical Language back in 1944. This is mode 6 of the modes of limited transposition, meaning that you can only transpose that scale 6 times before it becomes the same thing. So that's the way it works. So case in point, see, look. I'll just take, this is the scale. So I'm just going to take the first part, and if I scoot up 6 frets, that's the same scale. So I can transpose it. This is now the same collection of pitches as down here. So it doesn't go up a full octave, it only goes up 6 steps before it becomes itself again. And which is neat because then we can see it's just whole step to whole step, and then half step, whole step, half step, just like that. So I can find fun things to do, like stuff like that. Thanks, Chris, for that one. And so then moving on, we've got, we're going to look at some contrary motion in this scale. And then we're going to look at some tunes. We're going to look at, places like where dominant 7 flat 5s live, but then how you can just put it on any dominant chord. Okay, so some contrary motion. So that's in the scale. Drop 2, drop 3, drop 2 and 4, and then that's tricky. My hand's feeling a little tight today. So that's just doing drop 2, drop 3, drop 2 and 4, which is a nice little, small bit of contrary motion in those outer voices. So then let's look at the elevator, which we talked about. And the elevator works. All the things work on this scale that we've talked about using on the other scales of chords. So really in this episode, we're just looking at some applications of those things. Because all the things we talked about, chromatic scale, contrary motion, they all work. Borrowing. So here we are, starting on unison, and then the sequence is the same as it always is, to the third, and then to the triad, and then to the octave chord, and then to the, there's the octave chord, this was the shell chord, octave chord, drop 2, drop 3, and then drop 2 and 4, so I'll do that without talking. From any scale point. So this is on the second scale degree, and then all that. It's really nice to explore, and I strongly recommend finding each one of these floors and just spending time with just one floor moving around. So I'm going to go, and here I am on the triad floor, really wonderful one to explore, right? Just like that, and then you can move around in that floor, and then you can decide, well, now I'm going to go to from the triad to the shell chord, and I'm going to go up through that, right, and so on and so forth, and then maybe now I'm going to go out to the octave chord, and then maybe to drop 2, and then back to octave, and then work your way around that the structure until it becomes more clear to you. Always good to do. I practice that. Always need to practice that a bit. So then something I love to do, take a little chord like a shell chord, look at the top 2 notes, and you can see it's the third. So then the third would go out to a triad, and then that would go out to a shell chord, and then octave chord. See what I'm saying? I'm just looking at the top 2 notes. I'll put a little bracket on it on the score. So instead of doing this, a little less cumbersome is to just go play the interval there like this, right there. And I can do this. Sorry, we'll do that again. Diminished to the chord, to the diminished, to the chord, to the diminished. Yeah, and so on. This is fun to do. And then really pretty stuff. So then another thing is to look at intervals, not chords, just intervals for everything of all shapes, but in particular doing parallel motions with thirds, sixths, and octaves. So here is thirds. Okay, so I'm going, this is on the flat 5 and the third of a D7, right? And I'm just going to go. There's an interval cycle, just like this. It has a repetition right there where it's just going to do the same pattern now of shapes. Same thing here. This sixth that I'm doing is actually a minor 7th, chromatically speaking, but it's a 6th within the scale. And so that minor 7th goes to major 6, to minor 6, to major 6, minor 7th, major 6, minor 6. So the cycle repeats right here. So I go, and then same thing there, which is really cool. And then it makes it easier to learn the things because there's this repetition, right? And then what we can look at is doing Barry Harris's chromatic scale. Remember, that is So I'm filling in rhythmically little half steps. And then when I don't have a half step between the notes, I jump like that. So now, okay, that's the sound of that. It's really pretty. See? And then with contrary motion is really fun. So then looking at that, there's this nice quality where I can go right here. This also repeats up here. Maybe I'll take this and put it at the beginning of a line in A train. So in A train, it has a dominant 7 flat 5. Take the A train, so it goes right, and that's the chord. So maybe I'll go I can put that right there. That's using the linear. What I did was I chained it into some of what are called the ABCs from Barry Harris, which are great for doing single note lines. And that's where, Chris over at Things I Learned from Barry Harris has a big catalog of that. I'll be talking about those more. I've talked about the chromatic scale. I'll talk about those more just to kind of like put it in this context of this conversation I'm having about this stuff. But you can really go over there if you're interested. And I'll put in the PDF, I'll put a little line, like I'll do that one like that I just did. And then let me do, so either that or if I can't think of it, I'll do something. So that's what I'm going to start with. There's chromatic motion with 6, dominant 7 flat 5 diminished. So that's nice. Yeah. So that's playing just melodically in it. You know, there's all kinds of, when you learn the ABCs, you're just putting little motives together. So I'll put one on the PDF and just kind of like bracket the ideas, you know. Maybe that's another one. So well, yeah, have to work on that. But it's fun to chain these ideas together. So then, okay, so moving forward with our contrapuntal discussion. On this kick, Barry points out this wonderful line you can do. I've seen him teach it a couple times in videos. So I'm on dominant 7 flat 5, and I just find where the tritone is that exists between the 3rd and 7th of the dominant 7 flat 5. I'm going to move that down chromatically. Okay, so I'm going to go until it becomes the flat 5 in the root, because that's the other tritone found within this chord. There's 2 tritones interlaced. So I'm going to go diminished chord, playing the scale, the next dominant 7 flat 5, and that allows me to move chromatically down with that tritone. I'm going to do that on top now, because now I have the 3rd and the 7th there. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to do it on the bottom now, because it's the 3rd and the 7th. So a really pretty sound. So now, you can do this, again, you don't need it to say dominant 7 flat 5 on a chart. It's just, if it sounds good, then it sounds good. So like say, and then here at the, so in A trine, so at that point, it goes like, you know, sometimes people do a little thing like something. this. But anyway, something. Anyway, I'm going to do this Barry Harris thing on that part where it just does a little turnaround and hits the 5. So it goes, and it goes, right? It does that. So I'm going to go, it's fast, so it's, I'm going to go, right? And there's my dominant 7 flat 5 back into the tune. That's the first 8. All right, I'll try it again. Right. That's what it is. Something like that. So that's the tune, putting it in the tune. It's really fun. So then we are, let's look at borrowing. Yeah, borrowing in this scale is great. So here I am. If you look at the second episode of borrowing where I'm talking about using the elevator to borrow, you can do that with this. So I'm going to take my dominant 7 flat 5, and then I'm going to borrow, I'm doing a drop 2, so I'm going to borrow the top 3 notes from an octave chord of the diminished that's right above, and this is covered in that episode. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to take these 3 notes. It's going to make a couple notes go up, one go down, something like that. I don't even know. That's what happens. So this note goes down, this goes up, and this goes down. So pretty sound. And what's cool when you're in this type of situation, like in A train, this is D dominant 7 flat 5, but I'm in the key of C. So that means this is the 5 of the G, and what happens is then you get D minor to, that's what happens. So in that type of case, in this type of case, it's really nice with the dominant 7 flat 5 because the diminished for it is the same diminished that goes to the D minor 7, because that's F major 6. It uses the same diminished as D minor 6, which could be played on G, or A flat minor 6. So those all have the same diminished. So I can have some fun with that by going. See, I did actually the borrowing on this one is the same because I got D in the bass in the borrowed notes of the diminished, and then that could be the D could be the root of D dominant 7 flat 5, or it could be the 6 of F major 6. So I get like that, or like that, like that kind of sound, right? Something like a little buzzy, but you get the idea. Something. Anyway, that's the idea. And so more borrowings real quick, because borrowing, listen to that. So I love things that sound like something but then are revealed to be something else. So here, it's a C major chord. But actually, I could view it as borrowing some diminished notes. These are all diminished notes on D dominant 7 flat 5 with the 7th in the bass. So I'm finding that I always like to find a formula that creates the borrowing. So this is an octave chord of the diminished that's near this note. So it creates a nice sound. Or I could go like that. I go. So I can find that formula elsewhere, and it's a really, beautiful sound. So I can go, whoops, and then I'm gonna go, resolving to G minor in this case, just having fun with the sound, but putting it in a tune, it could be. It's really fun. So those are beautiful sounds, Stella by Starlight. You can put them anywhere, just wherever you feel like. And then for classical guitarists, I'm going to do a video on Ponce Sonata 3 first movement, because we're about at vocabulary where we could do an analysis of that whole thing and improvise in the whole thing. But there's a part where it goes, right? So you get the part where, so that I don't even need to drop it to you for that section of it, I guess. But this sound, G7, flat 5, sharp 5, whole tone, right? So you get this flat 5, and this is tritone sub, but there's a flat 5 of G, the 7th of G, the G, and this is the flat 5, and then B is the 3rd. So you could go, you could do, you could play that. So, you could go, right, and that is, whoops, and then, and that's what he goes there. That's C minor at that point. So you're getting that. That's the sound. So it's a beautiful sound. I hope this has been informative. There's so much to talk about with this scale. And I'm going to put some practice tips in the PDF that I get to you guys. But it's all about movement. So don't get hung up on one chord, and don't get hung up on learning chords, would be my advice. But take something and move with it as quickly as you can. Like take just one of these and learn to do just that. Back and forth. I'm taking an incomplete shell chord, go and do a little dyad, go into an incomplete shell chord. That's a fun move, which is full explication of that. See? Is that triad. So incomplete chord, take the top thirds, triad without the middle note, but I could play the middle note. So just little motions are really beautiful, and then resolving it in some nice way. So I hope this has been helpful. And I sure am enjoying doing these, and it's been really wonderful to see people take interest and follow along and ask questions and give comments. So feel free to do that. Drop some comments if you have anything you'd like to share, or ways that you've thought of using this stuff, because you might think of something that I haven't thought of, which would be fantastic. And I'll be talking about more things. I think we're going to talk about octatonic scale next time. That's what I'm thinking. And so I'm going to try to get back on the weekly schedule. I've been a little on hiatus, but I'm back. So thanks so much, everybody, and keep practicing.